Luke Tanner had faced bad cards, bad men, and bad luck before. None of it shook him the way Anna Blake's quiet confession did. "I've been aching down there." She said it so softly he almost thought he heard it wrong. But when he looked at her face, he knew he had not. Her hands were locked together so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Her gray eyes were full of pain, not shame, but the kind of pain that came from carrying something alone for too long. Luke stood still in the middle of the small adobe house that had become their home only a few days earlier. The words hit him harder than a fist. He had married Anna because of a foolish bet inside the dusty Spur saloon. A stupid game. A worse loss. One hand of cards had turned into a wedding in front of half the town. He had told himself it was a joke gone too far, a punishment, a trap. But now, looking at Anna standing there in the flickering lamplight, he realized this was not about him at all. This was about a woman who had spent her whole life being overlooked. "Anna," he said, his voice lower than before. "What do you mean? Are you hurt?" She swallowed hard before answering. "It aches because I've worked too hard for too long at Papa's store, lifting crates, standing all day, never resting. I never told anybody, not Papa. Not the doctor, nobody. They all think I'm fine." Luke felt a sharp twist in his chest. For one strange second, he was ashamed of every thought he had ever had about her. She was not complaining. She was not trying to make trouble. She was telling him the truth because she was afraid of being misunderstood again. "I didn't want you thinking something was wrong with me," Anna said, staring down at the floor. "If I moved slow or winced, I didn't want to seem like a burden." The word hit him hard. Burden. That was what the town had made her believe she was. Quiet Anna Blake, the shopkeeper's daughter, the woman nobody noticed unless they needed something done. Luke took one step toward her. "You're not a burden." She looked up at him, startled, as if no one had ever said those words to her before. Before he could speak again, a strong gust of wind slammed against the side of the house. The walls rattled. The lamp flame jumped. Then thunder rolled across the desert, deep and heavy, like the sky itself was warning them. Anna turned toward the window, and for the first time Luke saw real fear in her face. "Storm season came early," she whispered. "Papa used to say these winds can tear roofs off like they're made of paper." Another blast of wind hit the house. This time something cracked overhead. Luke looked up. The next sound was worse. A section of roof shifted with a groan and then broken tile slid loose. Rain poured through the opening in a sudden rush, splashing onto the floor and table below. Anna gasped. "Luke." He moved without thinking. Buckets, pots, anything that holds water. The storm hit them full force after that. Rain hammered the roof. Wind screamed through every crack in the walls. Water began spilling through more leaks, faster than either of them could move. Luke grabbed a pot from the stove and shoved it under the first stream. Anna rushed for another, then another. Within moments the whole room turned into chaos. Water splashed across the floor. The lamp shook on the table. A chair tipped over when Anna spun too fast trying to catch a leak in the far corner. Luke pulled it upright and pushed another bucket toward her. "Stay away from the center beam," he shouted over the wind. "If it gives, that's where it'll fall." She nodded and kept working, her dress already soaked through, her braid coming loose over one shoulder. Luke ran to the back door and shoved it open. Rain hit him in the face like stones. The ladder against the wall was already swaying in the storm. He grabbed it anyway. "Where are you going?" Anna cried. "To save what I can." "Luke, no." But he was already outside. The storm was violent and wild. The roof tiles were slick beneath his boots. The wind nearly tore him sideways the moment he climbed up. He dropped flat, one hand gripping the edge while the other reached for a loose section of broken tile. Rain ran down his face and into his eyes. Thunder cracked so close it seemed to split the dark open. Still, he kept moving. He did not know exactly why. Maybe because it was his house now too. Maybe because she was inside. Maybe because the sound of her voice when she said, "I didn't want to be a burden," had done something to him he did not understand. He managed to wedge a tarp over the worst opening, securing it with broken boards and rope. It would not hold forever, but maybe it would buy them time. When he climbed back down and stumbled inside, soaked through and breathing hard, the kitchen was a mess. The floor was covered in water. Buckets and pots were full. Anna was kneeling near the table, pushing water toward the door with an old washpan. She looked up the second he entered. Fear filled her eyes. Is it bad? Luke wiped rain from his face. It's bad. Her expression fell. Then he added, but we'll get through it. Something changed in her face then. Not relief exactly. Something softer. Something that looked almost like belief. Another loud crack sounded overhead. Luke crossed the room in 2 quick steps, grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the back room. Come on, safer in there. They rushed into the small room behind the kitchen, the only place the storm had not reached yet. The walls still shook, but the roof above them held. Luke closed the door halfway and leaned against it, catching his breath. Anna stood near the bed, holding a small wooden box tightly against her chest. Luke noticed it right away. What's that? She looked down at it. My mother's things. Her voice had gone very soft. It's all I have left of her. For a moment the storm was all they heard. Rain, wind, thunder. The whole world outside sounded like it was coming apart. Luke sank down on the edge of the bed, water dripping from his shirt onto the floorboards. Anna stayed standing, clutching that box like it was the only steady thing in the room. You saved the most important thing you own, he said. She nodded. What would you save? The question caught him off guard. He opened his mouth, then stopped. What would he save? He thought of his cards, his hat, his horse, his old poker winnings hidden in a tin under the stove. None of it mattered, not really. None of it felt like something a man held onto when the world started falling apart. He gave a small shake of his head. I don't know. Anna watched him quietly, then said the one thing he did not expect. That must be lonely. The words settled between them with more force than the thunder outside. No one had ever said anything that honest to him before. Luke looked at her differently then. She was not just the quiet woman he had been stuck with because of a bad bet. She was someone who noticed things other people missed. Someone who understood pain because she had carried her own in silence. Morning came gray and wet. The storm had passed, but it had left its mark everywhere. The main room looked wrecked. Part of the roof had caved in. One wall was soaked. 2 chairs were broken. The floor squished under Luke's boots when he walked across it. Anna stood in the middle of the room, pale and tired, her hair still damp from the night before. She took in the damage with steady eyes. Luke expected tears. Instead, she said, "We'll fix it." He looked at her for a long moment. Then he answered, "We'll fix it together." And for the first time since the whole foolish marriage began, Anna did not look like a stranger standing in his house. She looked like someone he wanted to stand beside. Outside, the sky was clearing. But Luke had the strong feeling the real storm had only just begun. Luke Tanner had spent most of his life knowing exactly how to leave. He knew how to walk away from a bad table before the sheriff showed up. He knew how to slip out of a saloon before a fight turned bloody. He knew how to keep his boots pointed toward the next town before anyone expected too much from him. But after the storm, leaving Anna no longer felt simple. The house looked half broken, but somehow the space between them felt stronger than before. Maybe it was because they had survived something together. Maybe it was because Luke had seen Anna in the worst kind of night and watched her stay steady through it. Or maybe it was because she had looked at him in that back room, holding that little wooden box, and seen straight through the life he had built around running. By morning, neighbors began showing up one by one. Old Mr. Holloway came first with a hammer and nails. Then Mrs. Perkins brought bread wrapped in cloth and a bucket of hot coffee. By noon, half a dozen men were up on the roof with Luke, laying tarp and fresh boards across the worst damage, while the women helped Anna carry soaked things into the yard. Anna did not stand back and wring her hands like some helpless bride. She worked beside them all, lifting chairs, sorting wet blankets, and laying out ruined supplies under the dry sun. Her dress hem was muddy. Her sleeves were rolled up. Her hair kept falling loose around her face, but she never once stopped moving. Luke noticed the way folks looked at her now. Not with pity, not with that dull kind of politeness people used on women they thought were too quiet to matter. They looked at her with respect. By afternoon, Jacob Blake rode up hard from town, his face pale until he saw Anna standing on her own 2 feet. He jumped down from his wagon and caught her by the shoulders. "You all right?" "I'm fine, Papa," Anna said softly. "We both are." Jacob's eyes shifted to Luke then. For a second neither man spoke. The old merchant had never liked Luke much, and Luke had never given him many reasons to. But something changed in that silent look. Jacob gave one slow nod. It was not warmth, not yet, but it was trust beginning. When the last neighbor left and the yard finally quieted, Luke stood near the porch with a hammer still in his hand and watched Anna fold the salvaged linens into neat piles. The late light touched her face and turned the loose strands of hair around her cheeks almost silver. "You never panicked," he said. She looked up. "Neither did you." "That ain't true. I panicked plenty. I just didn't have time to show it." That brought the smallest smile to her face. Luke stared for half a second too long, caught off guard by how much he liked that look on her. Then Anna said something that took the smile right back out of him. "You came back." He frowned. "Of course I came back." She lowered her eyes to the folded cloth in her hands. "That's not obvious to everybody." The words hit him harder than he let show. He understood then that Anna had not been afraid only of the storm. She had been afraid of being left alone in it, afraid of having to survive one more hard thing by herself while the rest of the world looked the other way. Luke stepped closer. "Anna," he said quietly, "I'm not leaving you." She looked up. "Not in a storm," he went on. "Not when this house needs fixing. Not when somebody comes riding hard. Not for any reason that matters." Her eyes stayed on his face for a long moment. There was something fragile in them. Something careful, like hope trying to come back after a long time away. Then she nodded once and went back to folding linens, but her hands shook a little. The next few days settled into a rhythm Luke had never known he wanted. He repaired fence posts and patched the porch steps. Anna scrubbed the mud from the floors and hung blankets in the sun. They shared meals at the same table, and the silence between them no longer felt stiff. It felt easy. One evening, Luke stood at the stove stirring a pot of beans while Anna sat nearby mending one of his shirts. "You're improving," she said. He glanced back at her. "At cooking. At not burning the whole meal." He laughed high praise. "You only ruined one pot this time." That made him grin. "Then by Christmas, I might be fit for civilization." A soft laugh escaped her before she could stop it. Luke went still. He had never heard Anna laugh like that before. It was light and warm and so unexpected that it made something twist in his chest. She noticed him staring and looked down quickly, cheeks turning pink. He turned back to the stove, but the smile stayed on his face long after. Later that same evening, they sat across from each other at the table, the lamp low, the room quiet except for the sound of her needle pulling through cloth. Luke watched her for a while, then asked the question that had been building in him. "Why did you agree to marry me?" Anna kept stitching for a moment longer before answering. "Because I was tired of being invisible." The honesty of it made his jaw tight. She did not look up when she said it, maybe because she was ashamed of the reason, maybe because she thought he would laugh. He did neither. "You're not invisible to me," he said. That made her glance up fast. Luke held her gaze and did not look away. Color rose in her cheeks again, and for some reason that small blush meant more to him than any bold flirtation ever had. The peace between them did not last. 3 days later, trouble came riding in from the east. Luke and Anna were outside near the barn repairing a loose board when he saw the riders first. 3 men, fast horses, dust rising behind them, and at the front was a face Luke knew too well. Red Jack. Mean, bitter, and always hungry for trouble. Luke's body tightened. "Get behind me," he said under his breath. But Anna did not move. The men stopped about 20 feet away. Red Jack leaned forward in the saddle with that crooked smile Luke had always hated. "Heard you finally settled down, Tanner," Jack called out. "Heard your little bride thinks she's something special." Luke stepped in front of Anna anyway. "You got one chance to ride away." Jack laughed. You always were quick with a threat. His eyes moved past Luke then and settled on Anna. Folks say she can shoot. I came to see if that's true. Anna's hand tightened around the rifle leaning against the barn wall. Luke felt his pulse jump. Jack, he said, voice hard now, leave. But Red Jack had never been a man who listened to warning. He reached slowly for the gun at his side. The crack of a rifle split the air before Luke even drew breath. Dirt exploded inches from Jack's horse. The animal reared. Jack cursed and grabbed the reins. Luke turned. Anna stood with the rifle to her shoulder, steady as a church post. Her face had gone pale, but her eyes were locked on the riders. Jack's two companions reached for their guns. Anna fired again. This time the bullet tore the hat clean off one man's head. Silence dropped over the yard. Then Anna spoke in a voice Luke had never heard from her before. The next shot is not a warning. Red Jack stared at her. He looked from Anna to Luke and back again, and for the first time since Luke had known him, he seemed unsure. This ain't over, Jack snapped. Yes, it is, Anna said. Ride. And just like that they did. The riders turned their horses and tore back the way they had come, leaving only dust and shame behind them. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Anna's hand started shaking. Luke crossed the distance between them in 2 steps. Anna. Her voice trembled now that the danger was gone. I wasn't sure I could do it. But you did. I was terrified. Luke looked at her and felt something inside him crack open. She had stood her ground for him, for them. She had done it while afraid. He reached out slowly, giving her the chance to pull away. She did not. He drew her gently into his arms, and the second she leaned into him, Luke knew there was no going back to being strangers. You were brave, he said into her hair. She shook her head against his chest. I just couldn't let them hurt you. Luke closed his eyes. No one had said words like that to him before. He touched her cheek and lifted her face just enough to look at him. Her gray eyes were wide, full of fear and something else now. Something softer, something hopeful. You're not alone anymore, he whispered. Her breath caught. She looked at his mouth, then back at his eyes, and this time when he bent toward her, she did not pull away. The kiss was slow and careful and nothing like the brief, empty wedding kiss they had shared in front of the town. This one felt real, warm, human, full of everything they had survived together already. When they finally pulled apart, Anna's voice came out barely above a whisper. I've been aching because nobody ever cared enough to ask what hurt. Luke cupped her face gently. I care, he said, more than I expected, more than I know how to hide. Her eyes filled, but she did not look away. Then don't hide. That night changed everything. They no longer moved around each other like two people trapped by a bad bargain. They moved like a husband and wife beginning to choose each other on purpose. Still, Luke knew trouble had not finished with them yet, and the next danger would be worse than the first. Wait, before we move on, what do you think about the story so far? Drop your thoughts in the comments, I'm really curious to know. I've been aching down there, the mail-order bride confessed. The lonely cowboy did this. After the gunfight, nothing between Luke and Anna felt the same. The small adobe house no longer felt like a place where two strangers had been pushed together by a foolish card game. It felt lived in, shared, warm in a way Luke had never known before. He found himself looking for Anna in every room without meaning to. He listened for her footsteps in the morning. He noticed when she hummed under her breath while folding laundry or when she smiled at something he said and then tried to hide it. Anna changed too. She was still quiet, but not in the same way. Before, her silence had felt heavy, like she was folding herself smaller so no one would have to make room for her. Now her silence felt peaceful, strong, like she was finally beginning to believe she had a place in the world and in his home. One cool morning, Luke walked into the kitchen and found her already sitting at the table with both hands wrapped around a cup of warm water. She looked pale, too pale. He stopped in the doorway. Anna. She lifted her eyes to him, mourning. He crossed the room quickly. You feeling bad? She gave a small nod. A little strange these past few days. Tired, dizzy, sick when I wake up. Luke stared at her. For 1 second the meaning did not land. Then it did, all at once. His pulse jumped so hard he felt it in his throat. "Anna," he said, lowering himself into the chair across from her, "do you think you might be?" She swallowed and gave the tiniest nod. "I think I might be pregnant." The room went completely still. Luke had faced loaded guns and angry men without blinking. But that one soft sentence nearly took the breath right out of him. Pregnant, a baby, his baby, their baby. He looked at her hands wrapped around the cup, then at her face. She looked scared and hopeful at the same time, like she was waiting for his reaction and preparing herself for disappointment. That alone made his chest tight. He reached across the table and took her hands carefully into his. "How do you feel?" he asked. Anna let out a shaky breath. Scared, happy, lost all at once. Luke squeezed her fingers. "Then we'll be scared and happy and lost together." A fragile smile touched her lips. "You mean that?" He almost laughed at the question, not because it was silly, but because it hurt to know she still had to ask. "Yes," he said, "I mean it." Later that day, they rode into town to see Dr. Harrison. The doctor was an older man with kind eyes and a soft voice that settled nerves instead of stirring them. He checked Anna gently while Luke paced outside the exam room like a caged animal. When the doctor finally stepped out, Luke turned so fast he nearly knocked over a chair. "Well." Dr. Harrison smiled. "Your wife is healthy, and yes, Mr. Tanner, you're going to be a father." Luke just stood there, a father. He had never pictured that word landing on his life, not once. He had pictured saloons, cards, dusty roads, maybe a shallow grave if his luck ran out, but not this, never this. When Anna stepped out from the room, Luke was beside her at once. He took her hand without thinking. The doctor smiled again. "The child is strong, early spring if all goes well." The ride home felt different from any ride Luke had ever taken. The same road stretched ahead. The same dry land sat under the same sky, but nothing looked the same to him anymore. Every fence post, every patch of dirt, every board in the house now belonged to something larger than just survival. It belonged to a future. That evening, Anna sat on the edge of the bed brushing out her hair while Luke leaned against the doorway watching her. She noticed him in the mirror. "What?" He smiled slowly, just trying to believe it. She looked down at the brush in her hand. "I still am too." Luke stepped closer and sat beside her. "You know what scares me most?" he asked. Anna glanced at him. "What?" "That I spent so many years living like nothing mattered." He looked down at his hands. "And now all of a sudden everything does." Anna set the brush aside. Then she rested her hand over his. "That doesn't make you weak," she said softly. "It makes you awake." He looked at her. Then he leaned forward and kissed her forehead, long and gentle. Winter came slowly after that. Cold mornings, sharp winds, clear skies that made the desert look almost silver at sunrise. Luke repaired the porch, rebuilt part of the roof properly, and fixed the weak places in the barn before the hard weather could settle in. Anna stayed busy inside, sewing little clothes from old soft fabric, cooking what she could, and sitting in the rocking chair her father brought over one afternoon with a quiet nod and no teasing. Jacob Blake still was not a warm man, but he had softened around Luke. He no longer looked at him like a reckless fool who had ruined his daughter's life. He looked at him like a man still deciding, but leaning in the right direction. The town changed too. People no longer talked about Anna as the quiet girl from the store. Now they called her Mrs. Tanner. The woman who stood through a storm. The woman who fired warning shots at Red Jack and sent him running. And Luke heard something else in those whispers too. Respect. Not because he had won some card game or thrown a punch in the right place. Because he had stayed, he had become the kind of man people could count on. That truth mattered more than he wanted to admit, but peace never stays unchallenged for long. It happened late one cold afternoon. Anna was near the fire inside, one hand resting on the small round swell of her belly while Luke split kindling outside by the shed. He heard the hoofbeats first. Fast. Too fast. His body reacted before his mind caught up. He dropped the axe and turned. 3 riders were coming down off the ridge. Red Jack, again. And this time the look on Jack's face held no mockery, only anger. Luke moved fast, grabbing his rifle from beside the door just as Anna stepped out onto the porch behind him. "You stay inside," he said sharply. Anna shook her head. "No." "On it. We stand together." There was no time to argue. The riders pulled up hard in the yard. Red Jack stared at them with hate written plain across his face. "You think you shamed me," he spat. "Think you can run me off my own ground?" Luke lifted the rifle. "This ain't your ground." Jack sneered. "Maybe not yet." His men spread out slightly on either side of him. Luke felt the danger before the first move happened. Anna stood just behind him, one hand near the rifle she had brought with her, the other pressed protectively over her belly. Then Luke saw it. The shift in Jack's eyes, not toward him, not even toward Anna's face, toward the child she carried. Something cold and savage went through Luke. Red Jack's hand dropped to his gun. Luke moved at the same instant, shoving Anna slightly behind him and firing. The shot cracked through the frozen air. Jack's horse screamed and reared. Jack flew sideways into the dirt, his gun spinning from his hand. One of his men cursed and wheeled around immediately. The other followed. Within seconds, all three were fleeing again, this time not from pride but fear. Silence rushed back in behind them. Luke lowered the rifle slowly, his breath coming hard. Behind him, Anna made a small sound. He turned at once. She was trembling, one hand still pressed over her belly, the other gripping the porch rail. He crossed to her in 2 long steps. "Anna." Her eyes filled instantly. He was aiming at the baby. Luke pulled her into his arms so fast he nearly crushed her. "I know." Her tears soaked into his shirt. "I was so scared." "So was I." She drew back just enough to look at him. "You saved us." Luke shook his head. "No, we saved each other, same as always." He laid one hand gently over hers where it rested on her belly. His voice dropped low and fierce. "I won't let anything happen to you, or our child." Anna's face softened through the tears. "I know." He stared at her for a long moment. "Why?" She gave the smallest, saddest, sweetest smile. "Because when the storm came, you stayed. When danger came, you stayed. When everybody expected you to run, you stayed." Luke's throat tightened. He kissed her then, not with fear, not with hesitation, but with the full force of what she had become to him. His home, his wife, his whole life. Spring came gently after that. The hard cold broke. Wildflowers spread in patches across the desert. The cottonwoods along the lane moved with soft green leaves, and the little adobe house looked stronger than ever. The roof was whole. The porch was solid. The fence stood straight. The barn no longer leaned. Inside the house, Anna's laughter came easier now. Luke heard it in the kitchen, out in the yard, late at night when he said something foolish just to bring that sound out of her. Her cheeks were fuller, her eyes brighter, and the ache she had once whispered about in shame no longer seemed to own her. One warm evening, they sat side by side on the porch while the sun set across Cottonwood Lane. Luke had given her a small silver bird necklace 2 weeks earlier, and it caught the last light each time she turned her head. Anna rested one hand over her belly and looked at him with a soft smile. "Do you ever think about that card game?" she asked. Luke let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. "Every day." She tilted her head. "Do you ever think it was meant to happen? You losing that hand, me saying yes?" Luke reached over and laid his hand over hers. For a second he just looked at her. Then he said the truth. "I think losing that game was the first time in my life I ever truly won anything." Anna's eyes filled. "You won me," she whispered. "And our baby," Luke said, "and a future I never thought I deserved." A tear slipped down her cheek, but she was smiling. Then she said something that made his whole chest ache in the best way. "Luke, I'm not aching anymore." He lifted her hand and kissed her knuckles. "I know," he said, "because now you don't have to hurt alone." The stars began to show one by one above the desert. The evening turned cool. Anna leaned into him and Luke wrapped his arm around her carefully, feeling the baby move under his hand. A gambler with nothing had become a husband with everything. and the quiet woman nobody used to notice had become the center of his life, the heart of his home, the strongest person he had ever known. Together they had survived storms, gunmen, fear, and the loneliness they had both carried for years. Together they had built something real. Together they had chosen each other. The desert wind moved softly through the cottonwoods as Luke leaned close and whispered the truth he knew now all the way down to his bones. "The greatest thing that ever happened to me," he said, "was losing that hand, because it gave me you." Anna turned and kissed him softly under the starlit sky. And this time, neither of them felt invisible again.